Are you excited to find a website where you can get custom one-off parts for your Chevy Cruze? Go to supercruises.com today so you can make your ride even better. Hi everybody, welcome to the Dave's World YouTube channel. So if you pretty much spend your time on YouTube looking for Chevy Cruze parts or Chevy Cruze builds, you probably know my car. It's known as Cruze Missile. It has a really powerful engine in it for a 1.4 liter. We're talking big turbo with methanol injection. And everybody pretty much knows the car. Not only that, I pretty much have the only Cruze with a body color Ikon spoiler with matching duckbill. We do have a major problem. It fell off. So what I pretty much want to do is, after the spoiler fell off, I got a bunch of tape and covered every single hole that water would make its way through, because obviously I was worried about getting water in the trunk. What I'm gonna do is probably put the spoiler on, try to line up all of the holes underneath the spoiler, and use some self-tapping screws or something a little more mechanical to hold this spoiler on. I think this is important when it comes to the Ikon spoiler install, because double-sided tape is pretty much no bueno. Okay, so when I started pulling all this double-sided tape off, I was a little worried that the spoiler wasn't thick enough for me to put a screw through, but I discovered something after I pulled the tape off. If you look here, there's actually a hole there and a hole right there. We also have one more right here. I don't know what I could use that for, but it might be possible to use. But here's what I want to point out. Here's the original spoiler. You see this stud and you see that hole? If you line this right up to where the spoiler sits on the trunk, it looks like this stud and that hole line up in the same spot. I might get lucky and be able to maybe reuse this stud or get another stud to be able to go in there. Then I can mount this to the trunk solidly. Parts. Okay, obviously I didn't have any luck going to the local auto parts stores, but I did have a backup plan. This spot right here is pretty much where the stud would go through. If I get the right stud and I just make this hole a tiny bit bigger, I'll be able to mount this spoiler without a problem. Okay everyone, it's the next day. I ran out of time last night because I had to go to the movies, but I didn't want to give up on this spoiler. I did order the parts that I found on Amazon for this spoiler, but I decided, you know what, let me see if I can find something local, and I ended up picking up some studs. I'm going to show you guys how to use some studs from a local place. I will also put a link for something like this from Amazon in the description, because if you can't find it locally, at least you can get the same thing I'm using in the video. Basically, these are about 6mm holes. What I'm going to do is permanently secure these studs in these holes so they don't come out before I install this on the car. So this part of the video is a little bit slower paced. I wanted to really focus on what I was doing. So these were 6mm studs that I picked up from a hardware store by me. And what I decided to do is actually thread the holes in the spoiler with the 6mm thread pitch that matches the studs. And I very simply wanted to screw the studs in. The reason I'm focusing on this part of the video is if you decide to do the same thing and you go out and get a tap and die set and you want to add studs to your spoiler, I just wanted to show you how I was doing it. And keep in mind, if you go too deep in the hole, you'll actually damage the spoiler, because the tap could make its way through the bottom of the spoiler and actually push through the material on top, and you can create a
really forced hole on the other side. So just be careful with how deep you go down the spoiler. Just take your time. Make sure you look into the hole. Make sure you're not going too deep. You just want to be enough that you can get about, I don't know, let's say 5-6 threads, just enough for the stud to bite.
My apologies, I forgot to hit record on the camera, but basically I just mixed up some 5-minute epoxy and I put it inside the hole, and I'm letting the studs basically glue themselves into the hole.
Okay, so the next step of the process is to prep the spoiler for installation. So what I did was go out and get some really strong double-sided tape. This is the kind of tape you would use to adhere a body panel to the car. Make sure your surfaces are nice and clean, and make sure the tape is rated for some really strong strength. At this point, I'm test fitting the spoiler, and I'm realizing that it's not going to perfectly fit in these holes. I'm using a grinder to make the hole bigger, but if you do not have a little grinder tool like this, you could basically just drill 2 new holes directly in front of the existing 2 holes, just slightly above, within a 1/4 inch of space, basically right next to it, and make sure they're large enough and the spoiler will drop in place on the new area without having a problem. The reason you have to do this is because the spoiler wraps around the back of the trunk, and then you need to have space for the spoiler's studs to actually drop in place. Okay, so I'm slowing this portion of the video down because I want to explain what you should do with the holes on your trunk. A lot of people think the double-sided tape will actually keep water out, but it will not. What you really need to do is get yourself some really good RTV silicone. Fill in all of the holes, including the new ones, with as much silicone as you can. I mean, you want to glob it on there because what you want to do is make sure water's not going to get through. I use a little bit extra so it would actually contact the bottom of the spoiler a little bit. And I want the inside of the holes to be globbed up because you definitely do not want water intrusion, because basically you could fill your trunk up with water. This is why it's a problem. So I put a lot on here so I didn't have to worry about it in the future. And also, you know, it helps prevent rust on the new holes that I made as well.
Okay, you can see right here the studs for the spoiler came through right above the taillight. So what I'm going to do is clean the silicone off the threads, and then I'm going to use some fender washers. It's these big guys right here that'll actually cover the opening, and the silicone will keep water from getting in. Okay, now you can see the washer took up basically the opening where the holes were, covered them, and there's silicone everywhere to keep basically water from getting in. Every other hole has silicone through it, so we don't have to worry about leaking. And you can see the other hole is now covered as well. And the spoiler is now permanently mounted with studs.